everyone.
Hello, everybody.
We have the McCain duo. My name is Artina McCain.
My name is Martin McCain.
And today we have Kalena Bovell, the assistant conductor of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra and the conductor of the Memphis Youth Symphony Orchestra. And this is her first year in Memphis, and what a year it has been.
Absolutely.
We cannot wait to hear from her and see what she has to say. Enjoy. Hey!
I'm Martin McCain.
And my name is Artina McCain, and we are so excited because we have Kalena with us today. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Thank you for having me. I mean, I know we talked about this a while ago, so I'm glad we could finally make it happen.
Finally,
Definitely.
our schedules are all clear now, so.
Well, I mean, if you want to call COVID clear, sure, you know.
Right. COVID clear, which means you have stuff
Exactly.
to do, but not as much stuff to do.
Right.
Exactly.
So we're going to get started. We want to find out a little bit about you, and we'll just kind of see where the interview takes us.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
Can you tell us about your musical journey up to moving to Memphis?
Oh, I feel like that is such a loaded question.
It is loaded. Start like at age 5.
It's like, okay, so I am from LA. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, but my parents come from Central America. So they're from Panama or Panama. I want to take the accent off of it because sometimes my accent throws people. But they moved to the States, probably late 70s, early 80s with kind of that typical American dream kind of idea. They wanted to give my brother and I a chance at a better life, which for them was better opportunities for education and then also better job opportunities. So, I started singing when I was 9 years old, and it was kind of that typical, the elementary school choir teacher went around to every single classroom and pulled you out and was like, okay, sing this note. And you're like, oh. And I remember thinking, Mommy, I can sing. And I honestly never knew that because I didn't have an interest in music when I was a kid. Because it wasn't really presented to me. It was like I wasn't curious about it. But it wasn't until 6th grade when I started playing violin where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Wow.
But it was also in 6th grade when I was told, or when I was made to realize that you're not going to be successful because you're a Black girl. And I remember someone in my class saying, yeah, you'll never be good because you're Asian, right? And I was like, oh, okay, well, now I have to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
So, imagine being like an 11-year-old person thinking, wow, here's like a kid who's already telling me showing me the obstacles that I'm going to be facing. But it was many more obstacles that I faced that weren't just adversity. Many injuries happened, which is kind of typical, I feel like, for most string players. But really, I went to undergrad as a music education major, and it was during my sophomore year where we all had to take instrumental conducting. And I remember getting on the podium, and I was like, okay, how is it I've gone this long and no one has ever told me that conducting is a thing? Like, I never knew that this was an actual art form, And so that's when I went back to my parents. I'm like, okay, I want to be a conductor. And, they were like, that is fantastic. What is that?
I was wondering, I'm like, how was that response?
Train, Amtrak.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, so like getting over the initial, like, this is what a conductor is. That's kind of how my journey started. I went to different workshops. I told myself that if I'm going to be successful in this business, I have to go to grad school on the East Coast. Because I was realizing that a lot of students who were serious went to school on the East Coast. They went to Juilliard and the Curtises and the Peabodys. So I went to the Hart School and have 2 degrees from there. I have a master's in master's in instrumental conducting, and then a graduate performance diploma. And so after Hart, I got offered a job at a boarding school where I did basically everything. I was the music director of the orchestra there, but I was also slowly building my career, so it's like I was guest conducting. I was doing a lot of covering. I had a conducting fellowship. So I was doing everything and then some, because boarding school was basically a 40-hour plus job. And then when you're a musician, it's like you're putting in nonstop hours. So pretty much I was grinding 24/7 And in that 4-year period, I was taking auditions. And so it was May 2019 when Bob Moody called me and was like, hey, we have this job opening becoming available. Would you be interested in auditioning? And I remember thinking, you had me at Bob Moody calling. So just tell me when and where so I can buy the plane ticket, you know. So yeah, that's how how I got here.
Wow. So did you know Bob before? I mean, that's awesome. Just get a call and you have a job.
I mean, like, it was very briefly. So I was in Memphis back in 2016 to assist the former music director, Mayan Chen, with her final Masterworks concert. And so there was that 1-year period where there wasn't an assistant. And so when Bob had gotten the job, they had started the search. And so I was offered a phone interview. I was like, hey, all right, I'm a semifinalist for the job. That's fantastic. So I spoke with Bob on the phone, and that was kind of the initial introduction. And after that, it was, I friended him on Facebook. We followed each other's careers. And so when the job opened up again, he basically said, so many people here have recommended you, would you consider coming into audition? And I mean, it was such an honor just to, go back to Memphis and have all these people be like, oh my God, how are you doing? But then also just to be back in that space. Because I remember back in 2016, Memphis to me already felt like home. And so to be back there 2 years later, it was a really surreal feeling.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So I want
cool.
I want to rewind because you dropped like a lot of really great nuggets. Like you were just boom, boom, boom. Okay. So you said a couple of things. One,
That's what I do.
yeah. You said that you had an injury, and then you also said, talking about adversity as being a Black female in classical music, and hearing that at such a young age. So let's do it in two parts. So first of all, your injury. Was your injury what kind of steered you towards conducting, or why did you stop playing violin?
No, my injury was not what steered me towards conducting. So I have chronic tendonitis and have always had chronic tendonitis. It's just my physical makeup. I've been told by many physical therapists just that I have very loose joints. So it's just going to be a part of my life. And it has been a part of my life. But honestly, violin was always my first love and my first passion. So whenever something did arise, whether it was wrist stuff or shoulder stuff, I was always in PT because it was like, hey, I play violin. I need you to help me continue playing violin, but really for conducting, what's interesting is that when I went to grad school, I was adamant about doing both. And even though I was taking conducting lessons, I was also trying to take violin lessons. But, it's hard because you kind of come to that realization where you can either be really good at one thing or mediocre at two things.
Yes, yeah.
And I hate to say that I put all of my eggs into one basket, but I'll say I put 98% of my eggs into the conducting basket. And the 2% was I was still taking lessons, violin lessons every 1 or 2 months. And I was, I would still play for people because it was still important for me starting at the age of 11 to keep my skills up because, that's a long time to invest into something and then just give it up completely.
Right, exactly. I mean, pianists are similar, so.
Yeah, right.
There's a whole conversation about injury. I mean, I also suffered from an injury. We need a couple of shows. We need like Black hair show, Black conductor show, injury show. So tell us about, the adversity that you've overcome as, an Afro-Latina in classical music. I mean, that is so cool, but also very rare.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so much adversity that I've overcome along this journey, one being race, one being financial, one being educational. I feel like there's so many things about the field that people don't tell you. Like, yes, I know one being skin color. You don't see a lot of Black or African-American musicians in the field, or really you don't see a lot of musicians of color in the field. So when I was coming up as a violin player, I had Regina Carter, but Regina Carter is a jazz violinist. I wasn't interested in jazz, And so once I had become interested in conducting, I had heard of Calvin Simmons from my conducting teacher, but Calvin Simmons had already passed away. And then there was James Dupreece, who had also passed away. So aside from like those two heavy hitter Black conductors, I didn't know about anyone else. And then you think about, just the financial institutions, or I guess the financial side of trying to be a classical musician. Music takes lessons. And honestly, I started when I was 11. I didn't have my first lesson until I was 18. And there are a lot of reasons behind that. One is educational. Like, if no one tells you that these are the next steps in music, how are you supposed to know? So with my parents, they kind of thought, oh, she's playing in public school? That's great. But they didn't know that private lessons were a resource, summer programs, conservatories. They didn't know about any of those things. So I was 7 years self-taught. And then when you get into, okay, well, this person, like your daughter now needs to take private lessons. Okay, how much are those? Oh, anywhere from $50 to like $200. Now, in my household, my parents worked. I mean, they worked paycheck to paycheck. So quite honestly, if it wasn't a necessity, then it wasn't something that was budgeted in. And as much as I loved playing violin at the time, private lessons weren't a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's a huge financial burden, at least when you think of it that way. So already there's the educational aspects of just not knowing. There's the financial side of just, what is considered as essential? Like, what can we do as an immigrant family coming from another country, just trying to make it in this new world? And then also with my skin color, one, again, lack of representation, but then also kind of the field is still white male dominated.
Oh yeah.
And
definitely.
I remember being an undergrad and, the kind of the woman aspect of it, of being on the podium and having a great conversation with a friend who was like, you're a really great conductor, but I don't know, there's just something about playing under a woman that just bothers me. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you for that honesty. Let's have a conversation about it.
At least I told you to your face.
Well, I mean, totally. But the thing of it is like, as I like to say, in society, I am a Black person and then I'm a woman. In classical music, I'm a woman and then I'm Black, which I've always found interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, that is. So we have a lot of really young listeners who are interested in coming to college, or they might be going from a university undergrad program to master's. And I think that's really interesting what you were saying about lessons, because actually lessons is a privilege. We are both blessed to have had lessons, but you're right, they are very expensive. And let's face it, some of the rock star musicians that we see that are booked as soloists, they started at age 5 with the best teacher, in their area. And that doesn't mean that maybe some students from different economic and socioeconomic backgrounds were not talented. But if you get started at 18 and you get started at 5, clearly there's going to be a difference. So I'd be really curious for any advice you have for students listening who don't have access to lessons. Like, what are some things they can do to increase their skill level when maybe their parents or family are not supporting that?
I think the biggest thing you can do is be curious and ask questions. And so I think about, like, I used to be in this little Saturday conservatory, which was every Saturday for 3 hours. There was a orchestra component and there was a lesson component. So I was in the orchestra component, and I remember looking around at my colleagues who would do different technical things, and I would say, hey, how do you do that? And so they would show me, and then I would sit there and I would try to imitate it. And then I would go home and I would stand in the mirror and I'd be like, okay, they did this, and I would try to imitate it. And I think it's also important to watch just as much as possible. Now we're lucky that we have YouTube, but back in the early 90s, I'm dating myself, but back in the 90s, 2000s, YouTube still wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
And I know there are so many resources where it's like, yes, anyone can teach you to play violin, but I think those resources are so important, because for people who don't have access, we at least have this online access.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also just being able to find out what resources are in your community, which you can find out from your teachers. You can go to the nearby music store. I think there's always something that can be done, but I think the biggest thing is not, how do I say this? Not being afraid to try.
Yeah.
Because, the fact that I was 7 years self-taught, I knew that I was behind by the time I got to college.
Right.
But I remember thinking, oh, I'm like the greatest thing since like Wonder Bread, but then I heard one of my friends warming up and I was like, I can't do half the things that they can do. And it was this huge realization, and even like really quickly, I'll tell you, sophomore year of college, I got kicked out of orchestra. Now I played all freshman year, right? But then sophomore, all of a sudden it's like, well, you're just not good enough compared to your colleagues. And I was like, well, how is it I was good enough last year, but this year all of a sudden I'm not good enough?
Right.
And so like you think of the kind of like the psychology that had on me, but I also felt like that gave me an added drive, because for me, most of my life was people telling me no. And so it kind of gave me that drive to be like, even though you're telling me no, I'm going to show you yes, I can. And so I think that's the biggest thing that people coming up nowadays need to remember, is that there's always going to be someone who tries to break you down and tries to tell you that you can't do something, but you have to have the belief and the fire in yourself to prove those people wrong and prove yourself right.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
Kalena for president.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
So do you have any hobbies? I mean, I know when things are normal, I mean, you're pretty busy with the youth symphony and the orchestra and guest conducting, all that stuff. Do you like doing anything outside of music?
I mean, it's funny because Bob teases me. So, like, I'm very hardcore into, like, death metal and alternative music and, like, rock metal. So, yeah. So the way I say it is, like, anything that I can give myself whiplash to, I'm all about. I also really love, like, Bob is always like, I don't understand you. He's like, but that's cool. I was like, it's just who I am. Like, I don't know. But I also really love cooking. So I have a couple of like, I have gluten and a dairy sensitivity. So I always like trying to take just regular standard recipes and trying to tailor them to my needs. So like I've really gotten into baking lately. I love working out, like lifting weights and cardio is also my jam. And I'm a movie buff. You know, I used to work at a couple movie stores way back in the day. Like I used to work at a Blockbuster when they were still around.
What is that?
I know, right? Right? Exactly.
Some of these viewers probably don't know
They
what that
probably
is.
don't know what it is. Please explain.
But like Blockbuster was a place that you went to rent movies. It had little discs and everything.
In storefronts.
And video.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to rent video.
Well, you know, there's one Blockbuster that still exists in the entire country.
I heard about that.
Where?
Yeah.
Somewhere in Oregon.
Wow. It's worth like just being a tourist attraction at this point. Especially now that we're all in quarantine.
Oh, I know.
That's awesome. So what have you baked lately? Tell us.
So the last thing I baked was, I baked some gluten-free, dairy-free biscuits. And then I was like, I used to love getting like the sausage biscuit with egg, you know, from McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
And so I made my own version and it was beautiful. Before that, I make some banana muffins, but I kind of did a variety. So I did like strawberry chocolate, blueberry walnut, and then like regular banana walnut. I'm telling you, I love food. Like,
Kalena, when this is over, we're visiting.
I mean, like I said, I'm gonna hit you with some recipes. Like.
Okay, please. So we always like to ask, and you've just been like bomb dropping nuggets everywhere. But what is something that you could give to like this up and coming generation as they want to pursue? Let's say somebody wants to be like you, that there's a black girl out there, never seen a black female composer and wants to be a conductor. But yeah, there's not that much representation, and even just getting to a podium, even with a lot of talented, there's a lot of adversity to overcome the systems that's in place. Like, what can you say to her?
I love that, you know, and I think of it from the standpoint of what I wish someone would have told me as I was coming up as like a black classical musician, you know, which is that the journey is going to be really hard, but it's also going to be really worth it, you know, and that now being in Memphis, you know, I feel like a part of my duty is the fact that representation matters, and the fact that I reflect this community, and the fact that I get to go out into different schools, you know, and do these ORF education concerts. But for someone coming up, I would say that it's going to be hard work, but it's worth it, to never give up, and to always have a really good, close support system for people who, one, can keep you humble and honest, because you need to remember where you come from, but then also people who are going to tell you like it is, because you want someone to be like, no, that's not good. Do it again.
Yes. Yes. Right. Because and your cousin and your auntie too told you it was awesome, but
exactly. But let me tell you something. It wasn't that good. Okay. But like, I mean, I have a great network of friends that I can always bounce off and be like, look, I'm having a really hard day today. Okay, and then they'll be empathic, they'll give me that support. But other times it's like, you might want to rethink putting that out there and social media. It's like, oh, well, then let me relook at this, but I feel like those are the things that are super important. But I mean, the number one life lesson to anyone trying to do this is that the journey is going to be hard, and there's going to be so many things and so many people that are going to try to hold you back. I mean, you even look at educational institutions. Why don't you see a lot of people of color in music degrees? Because tuition is too high. And why is tuition high? Because they're trying to keep a select group of people out. My friend is a person of color and she's queer, and she teaches at George Washington University in the sciences. And this is something that we talk about all the time. She teaches honors classes and there's only one student of color in her class.
Wow.
And you're like, well, how do you interpret that? And so I remember these were conversations we always had growing up where, it's like, why is it when you look around, as an example, I remember my first class of undergrad, I think it's instinctive that any person of color, you look around to see how many of you there are.
No, we don't.
And I remember,
We don't do that.
but I remember looking around and be like, okay, there's 3 of us, all right. And then you look on the very last day of class and you're like, I'm the only one. And so those are the things. So I think it's also knowing that this is going to be a very kind of solitude life. You might be the only one, but you have to be the only one that perseveres.
Wow, that's great.
I love that. You need your own show.
Yeah, really. Yeah, well, I know the students in Memphis Youth Symphony are very fortunate to be able to work with you, and also like the members of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra as well. And so,
I mean, I feel like I'm lucky working with them. Like I love my kids, and I call them my kids. They're like, oh, Mama B. I was like, go ahead. I was like, but y'all are my kids. And if anyone hurts you, I will come after them, But now with the Memphis Symphony, it's like I feel so lucky because I've had such a great time this year. It's like I know that I'm still learning, and they know that. And the support that I have gotten from the organizations and the musicians themselves has just been amazing.
Oh, look at Memphis go. So tell our listeners, they're all from all over, where can they find you?
So you can find me online. My website is kalenabovell.com. I can send you guys that information, or you can totally look me up. You can also find me on my social media pages, Instagram, the Facebook. But pretty much I am around. So yes.
Yay.
Awesome.
Reach out to her, guys. She's amazing. Yes. I'm sure that she wouldn't mind hearing from any of you if you need some inspiration. So.
I don't, and honestly, like I love to say, I love keeping conversations going.
Yes.
And like I said, I really feel like young people today are going to be the future of classical music and just music in general. So anytime I can inspire or speak with someone, I'm all for it.
That's beautiful.
Awesome.
Thanks
for taking your time doing this. And
oh, you're welcome. I mean, totally. Thank you for having me. Like, it's just a lot of fun, and I'm serious. We need to do like a hair video and like an injuries video and like a quick. I mean, let's just hit up some videos.
You've given us like 3 other ideas. Special edition. Meeting codes only.
Right, exactly.
Okay, Kalena, it's been awesome. It's been great having you today.
Thank you.
bye.